On September 2, 1968, 3 men were diving off the coast of the Bimini Islands in the Bahamas. The day was quite ordinary, and the weather was wonderful. It was to be an ordinary dive. Everything was going normally until the men came across something quite interesting. There was a huge line of perfectly shaped boulders of various sizes and thicknesses under the water. What made these stones, or rather this structure, stranger than anything they had seen before was the fact that the stones were so arranged that they looked like a cobblestone road. In other words, the 3 men may have discovered part of a sunken city. As soon as they reported their discovery, the public went into a frenzy. While sunken cities are rare, people don't blow their discoveries out of proportion. But this discovery is like no other before. It is very special. It turns out that its discovery may have been predicted several decades earlier, with the location and year being extremely accurate. What's more, it was supposedly the prophesied discovery of the most famous lost continent of all time, Atlantis. The discovery of the underwater site off the coast of North Bimini was predicted sometime in the 1930s by Edgar Cayce. Also known as the Sleeping Prophet, Cayce made more than 20,000 predictions over 4 decades. He answered his clients' questions, which ranged from medicine to metaphysics, and he did it all while in a dreamlike state. Cayce became one of the most significant people to speak about Atlantis in recent history. His unique perspective and version of the lost continent fueled the modern fascination with what was supposedly just another legend in the vast tomes of ancient Greek mythology and literature. The earliest reference to Atlantis that we know of is by Plato. In his works Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes Atlantis as a once glorious city beyond the Pillars of Hercules, also known as the Straits of Gibraltar. Atlantis was also a continent in its own right, larger than Asia Minor and Libya combined. It was founded by Poseidon, who checked its rule to his sons. He made the eldest, Atlas, the rightful king of the entire island and ocean. In their presumption, the Atlanteans attempted to invade the territory of present-day Athens. The gods were angered at this action and decided to punish them. In 24 hours, the entire continent was destroyed by an earthquake and a huge flood, after which it was swallowed up by the ocean and never seen again. For most of human history since Plato, Atlantis has been considered a fictional place. According to most scholars, it is nothing but an allegorical tale created by Plato to remind us of the dangers of prideful nations. Even today, people believe it is just a fairy tale embellished over generations, but apparently not everyone thinks so. Although Plato does not indicate in his texts whether the continent is only a figment of his imagination, the dialogues themselves speak of Atlantis as if it were a real place. A number of historians and authors also believe that Atlantis, or at least a civilization similar to it, existed in the distant past, including Cranta, Posidonius, Strabo, and Ignatius Donnelly. But what is the role of Edgar Cayce? Cayce's version of Atlantis is slightly different. In the first place, he is not really talking about Atlantis itself, but rather about the people who once lived there and their eventual fate. After all, Edgar Cayce was a clairvoyant. People would come to him to have their fortunes read, past lives, cures for illness, or anything else they wanted to know about. It is through these so-called readings of universal knowledge that Cayce touches on the subject of Atlantis. In his readings, he describes Atlantis as a highly advanced society with superior technological achievements that still cannot be replicated today. They used crystals as a form of energy that powered the entire continent, as well as powering machines, communication devices, vehicles that moved by air, water, and land, and even weapons. In their early days, the Atlanteans managed to balance spiritual and scientific achievements. But there came a period when moral decline took irreversible precedence. Then they were simply destroyed. Unlike Plato's version, Cayce describes the fall of Atlantis as occurring over thousands of years, not the result of a single apocalyptic day. The prophet describes in great detail what Atlantis looked like, as if he had really been there. As a reader of universal knowledge, he was able to peer into the past life memories of people who came to him for advice. First, he would describe the person's last previous life, and then he would go on to describe the one before that, the one before that, and so on. In 1/3 of the cases, Cayce described the life of the person who lived in Atlantis. Some Atlanteans, he said, were reborn in the modern era to correct the mistakes of their past. Who actually was Edgar Cayce? He was born on March 18, 1877, into the family of Leslie and Carrie Cayce, who were farmers, and was one of their 6 children. They were all raised as devout Christians, and Edgar remained so to the end of his days. When Cayce graduated from the 8th grade, his family fell into dire financial straits. They could not afford the cost of him even going to school. So Edgar is left with an 8th grade education. At the age of 20, however, he entered an apprenticeship at W.R. Bowles's photography studio and actually became quite skilled at this craft. In the same year, he became engaged to Gertrude Evans, whom he subsequently married. Cayce's life was rather troubled. In the early 1900s, he lost his voice for unknown reasons. Having already lost all hope of recovery, he decided to undergo hypnosis. Then something extremely strange happens. During the session, he speaks. But this was only while he was under hypnosis. Once he was out of it, he could only whisper slightly. Just like in fairy tales, about a year later one day, Cayce's voice just came back. But it wasn't the same anymore because he had encountered the hypnosis. Edgar discovered that in this strange state, he could diagnose patients without them even being physically present. Even more puzzling, he had no medical knowledge. News of his extraordinary abilities spread quickly. Skeptics here will say that the man simply found a new way to make money. Well, Cayce, though, from beyond the grave will disprove you. Fully aware that his diagnoses and subsequent treatments did not stem from professional medical knowledge, he refused to charge his patients. The prophet even states that if his readings harm just one person, he will never read again. Over the years, he has helped thousands of people for whom medicine was simply raising its shoulders. Cayce also adamantly denies being a spiritualist. He returned to photography on more than one occasion and even opened his own studio with a relative. By some strange coincidence, however, their studio burned to the ground twice, and he found himself once again in the metaphysical field. Whether any higher powers had a hand in this, we can only speculate. After all this, however, comes a new challenge for Cayce. For the first time, he mentions reincarnations in his readings, causing him to fall into complete disbelief. Reincarnation is a foreign concept in Christianity. Although it was gaining popularity among spiritualists in those days, Cayce was reluctant to even speak on the subject. Despite his personal convictions, he could not refuse people who came to him for past life readings. So when he began to talk about Atlantis, everyone was shocked as he revealed things no one had expected. Since Cayce didn't just talk about Atlantis in his readings, people had to piece together the information about the continent piece by piece. Later writers, including his sons, compiled the prophet's revelations about Atlantis, and so a more complete version emerged. According to Edgar, the origin of mankind began 200,000 years ago. Humans were originally fourth-dimensional beings who incarnated on Earth to experience the third dimension. In the beginning, these spiritual beings only wanted to understand what life was like here. As such, they have no definite physical form, and for this reason, they can change form at will. Accordingly, they possess very strong psychic powers. However, as time passes, some of the spiritual entities who incarnate here become attached to the material realm. They fall in love with the pleasures of the flesh. Consequently, their form becomes more carnal, and they gradually lose their spiritual powers. They became the sons of Belial, who were evil and sinful. At the same time, those spiritual entities who continued to adhere to God's will were called sons of God. Those who incarnated on earth soon fell into moral decay and spiritual corruption. To restore order, the right hand of God, Amelius, was sent to earth. He divided himself into 5 beings and descended on various places around the world, including Atlantis. He then became Adam, who also became the progenitor of the 5 races. Cayce divided humanity into 5 races depending on skin color: red, black, white, yellow, and brown. According to him, the red race developed the fastest. When Amelius came to Earth, the world was made up of many groups, including the sons of God and the sons of Belial. In those days, humans, evil spirits, and giants roamed the earth in unison, the latter group being the result of the marriage of the sons of God to the daughters of men. Amelius comes to bring order to the chaos. He assigns roles to everyone, even the sons of Belial, to bring harmony. For a time, this produces a successful result. Civilizations have flourished together for over 100,000 years. In the next moment, however, the civilization of the Atlanteans greatly outclassed all others. Along with their technological advances, destructive weapons began to appear, including bombs and the so-called death ray. In turn, humans gained so much power that it began to harm them. Wars and disasters soon struck the earth. Unfortunately, many of the tragedies that later Atlanteans suffered are man-made. Their decline was gradual and slow. It took thousands of years until Atlantis was finally destroyed and swallowed by the ocean. There were 3 stages of destruction, the last occurring about 10,000 years ago. Even with their highly developed technology, the Atlanteans could no longer stop the impending doom. Moreover, when most of them fully accepted the human body, they could no longer use their psychic powers. Some of the Atlanteans managed to save themselves and fled to neighboring continents such as South America and Egypt. Others were destroyed along with the island, and so Atlantis finally sank into the depths, leaving no traces other than those in the minds of those who believed in it. Cayce believes that Atlantis will resurface one day, but before that, many things must happen to prepare for her return. First, the souls of ancient Atlanteans will be reborn in the modern age to help enlighten humanity. Second, there will be strange events that will take place in the coming years. As we have already said, Cayce predicts the discovery of the remains of Atlantis near the Bahamas. The discovery of the Bimini Road raised everyone's hope then that this must finally be Atlantis. If this proves true, it will prove that Cayce's clairvoyant abilities were real. But was it? It's still hard to say. Like many people in the field of metaphysical research, Cayce had many skeptics and naysayers. For one thing, the Bimini Road may not have actually been part of a sunken island. It even turns out it may not have been man-made at all. According to researchers, the Bimini Road, or wall, is just a natural formation, although it doesn't look like it. There are many supposed man-made structures that we have already talked about in our channel, and which these same scientists again insist are natural formations. A pity, but a fact. However, many of Cayce's predictions are proving to be true. He has predicted some of the major events in recent history before they happened, such as the Wall Street crash of 1929, the Internet, and World War II, and predicted the change in human consciousness exemplified by the coming of the New Age. But most interestingly, he predicted that the Earth would undergo major geological changes, including that the magnetic poles would shift. In fact, at this very moment, the Earth's magnetic poles are gradually shifting. Specifically, the North Magnetic Pole is shifting at a rate of 48 kilometers or 30 miles per year. Based solely on Cayce's predictions, Atlantis will rise again from the sea. In return, however, some of today's visible land will be submerged underwater. Does this mean that Atlantis will indeed surface one day? Or will it at least be confirmed to have existed like the legendary Troy or Knossos on Crete, also known as the site on which the labyrinth of the Minotaur was based, the biblical Nineveh, Pompeii, Angkor Wat, Petra, Kumari Kandam, and Heraklion? Will Atlantis, the last lost land, join this ever-growing list? We have no way of knowing, at least not yet. Yes, it sounds improbable, but not absolutely impossible. The last 200 years have witnessed insane developments in technology, leading to shocking archaeological discoveries. Over time, what was fantastic has become a reality. But is it possible that beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean lies an even earlier, highly advanced civilization? The story of Lemuria rivals in mystique even that of Atlantis. The legend of Lemuria takes us on a journey that will explore its scientific roots, its perception by mystics, and its many unexplained phenomena. Was Lemuria really an existing highly advanced civilization destroyed by catastrophe? Or was it simply a myth born of ancient legends and human imagination? We explore the clues that could answer that question in the video you see on the left.